Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, your one-stop shop for exploring the connections between fitness, health, and overall well-being. Join us as we dive deep into all aspects of a balanced and vibrant life, from pushing your limits in the gym to finding peace of mind outside of it. Whether you're a seasoned athlete or just starting your journey, you are in the right place to discover the knowledge and insight to perfect your fitness life.
All right, welcome back to the Think Fitness Life podcast. And today we're going to dive into a topic all about stress. Looking at stress a little bit different than what you're used to hearing. Many people are used to hearing it as stress is a bad thing, and certain stressors in your life will be triggered from events, from emotions, from daily living. And yes, that's all going to be the case, but we're going to learn today about the stress paradox and how to have an approach that will let you ditch the bad stress in your life for good and understand that, yeah, these stresses are going to happen in life, but the right balance of stress can lead to improvement in your health, improvement in your performance, improvement in all aspects of life. So we're sitting down talking with Matt Soule, who's an author, a speaker, and a professional instructor, focusing on how to approach stress management. I was kind of diving into your website a little bit. You got a lot going on. So the first kind of thing that really hit me was the Wim Hof breathing. I was like, oh, okay. All right, he knows it. And I've done it and it's amazing. And then I was getting a little bit further and I see this book, The Stress Paradox, and it's on my list to get. So I look forward to kind of reading it when I got to order it. And then I see this whole thing about stress. What you're about is basically being a stress expert. So it seems like your world is built off of having people understand what their stress is and how they can use it. Am I with that?
Yeah, so just a couple of points of clarification. I love that you saw the stress paradox. That's actually going to be released in early 2025. It's a book that I'm working on with the Bradley Corporation to put out. They did stuff, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Chicken Soup for the Soul, that kind of thing. The book that I launched, actually a second edition of this year, is called Stronger Through Stress. And same kind of concept, except it focuses on two different dimensions. One is for people that are looking to be optimal performers, those that are seeking to be at the highest part of their game. And the second group is for people that need restored health. So the subtitle for that book is Mastering Stress for Optimal Performance or High Performance and Restored Health. And the reason I put those two categories together, Eric, is because really they're two sides of the same coin. If you want to be a high performer, you need to understand how to leverage stress. And that's really what I focus on, teaching people to leverage stress to live their best lives. And in this particular sense, for the high performers, I take it a step further and I say you need to be able to master stress if you want the best, because otherwise what you're going to end up with is high performance for a certain time, and then there's a high likelihood that you're going to suffer a health setback. And that's what we see over and over, whether I'm talking to top athletes or world-class performers in, say, finance or tech entrepreneurs, whatever it is. The basic thing that comes up over and over and over is that people can rise to particular occasions, but suffer health setbacks if they don't have good ways to manage stress and rest states. And so that's really what that first book is about. And the stress paradox that you mentioned, it really speaks to a broader sort of group and tries to get down to helping people just leverage stress in their everyday lives that maybe don't have a lot of time to spend on a health routine, but want really good results for the time invested. So that's kind of the two categories that really I focus on.
And I like the avenue of managing stress, because we know nowadays the stress is a big problem from young kids to old kids. And I really want to kind of first start with the younger population, because I think this is not really understood a lot. And it seems, scrolling through your website, and I'm sure in the book, it talks about how to manage and understand stress, because it seems like nowadays what I see as a coach, when my kids, they don't know how to deal with stress. They get stressed and they go from parasympathetic to sympathetic, autonomic, and panic mode, and they kind of don't know how to function with when stress hits them hard.
Yeah, you nailed it. And one of the things that I see that's very common for young people is there's a lot of pressure, mental pressure, educational pressure, pressure for all types of performance, but lacking the tools of the everyday sort of more lower level exposures to different physical stressors, mental stressors, emotional stressors that will help them build resilience. And so they're very protected. Kids are so often protected. I run a martial arts school. I have for many years as part of my work. And you can see the kids that will come into the program and have very little experience with sort of that physical, mental, and emotional challenge. And yet they're expected to rise to these high occasions. And with just a little bit of time, focusing on some of these tools, good martial arts training, and that sort of thing, good breath work that goes in hand with that, all of a sudden these kids rise to the occasion much better. I'll tell you a story. So I had a young kid. He started training with me when he was about 11. And it was sort of by happenstance. His mother was followed in the park, actually, by a stranger. And she was with her son during that day. And it obviously caused a lot of alarm because it was a really creepy incident. Well, she came in for some self-defense training, and I had helped her with that. And it ended up being a success for how she viewed it. She encountered the same guy some days later and was able to know exactly what to do and when. And that was a big help for her. And so she enrolled her son in my program. Well, fast forward 3 or 4 years, and he's preparing to go to college. And the martial arts training that we did, along with some of the Wim Hof method training, some of the cold exposures and the breath work going along with it, helped prepare him actually to succeed very well in tests, stuff that's totally separate from the physical training. He was able to rise better, to do better on his SATs and ACTs, ended up getting admitted to Duke University, and credits a lot of his ability to manage anxiety, to manage the stress he experienced with the practices, cold water exposure, breath work, martial arts training, central things that help kids sort of encounter a challenge and learn to overcome on a consistent basis. Those small little challenges that we encounter day to day helps us with all the other stress that's loaded on us throughout our lives.
And when people kind of give a little pushback, let's take the cold exposure, and I kind of want you to intertwine the Wim Hof breathing with it, because they think they kind of go hand in hand. A lot of times when I mention it, cold exposure to someone, oh, you should try it, immediately they get pushed back. Oh, that's not comfortable. I can't do it. Or even cold showers in the morning. I challenged my athletes in the month of September. Let's do cold showers every single day. And I did it every single day, marked it off. And a lot of them, they just can't get to it. Dive into the science behind why cold water exposure, cold showers helps decrease that stress and helps someone become mentally fit to manage stress throughout the day.
Great. And you bring up the exact point of the stress paradox. It's the paradox that we can actually use a stressor, a very specific one, to help us get out of stress or manage stress better. That's the inherent paradox that I often speak about. And what you said is exactly right. If people are having to deal with something that's a sizable challenge that requires more effort, it's hard. I mean, that's just the reality. And it's not comfortable. It's not something that we're going to often just go out and seek something that's hard or difficult to do. But the key is that if we know how to do it, and let's get into the science so that we can understand physiologically what's happening in the body and what our goals should be so that we can have a successful challenge, meet it, and be all the better for it. So here's the deal. When we get into cold water, even something simple as a cold shower, as you had mentioned, what we're seeing is on the sort of outcome that we see is better mood, mental clarity, the circulation of our vascular system works better. We've had people that have gained flexibility. I've got a long-time martial artist, had always tried to be more flexible, started doing cold training, more than cold showers. He was also doing some ice baths and different protocols, but improved his flexibility in a way that he had never been able to do over, 20, 30 years of martial arts. So you're going to get a lot of different physical, mental, and emotional benefits from the practice. So how do you do it? Because one of the things that I misunderstood early on in my own training was that I thought we could just go into the cold shower and that was it. You just got to grit it, bear it, meet the challenge and be done. But that's actually not exactly. So the body goes through a stress response. And part of that stress response is it pulls blood away from the peripheral shell and it circulates blood in the core. You end up widening a lot of the vessels in the core in order to stabilize blood pressure. And that's a very healthy stress response, but it takes a little bit of time. That little bit of time is typically 20, 30, 45 seconds, sometimes even a little bit more, depending on how cold it is and how we react and how we show up to it. So that stress response that shifts everything, it takes time. And so that a really initial part, I didn't realize that. So I'd get to that 20, 30 second mark at the very beginning and just feel misery. And I was like, what am I doing here? This is wrong. I got to get the hell out of here. But that's not. So if we can just step into it in that initial cold shock that we experience with the body being primed for a stress response, well, okay, if we can learn to be calm, breathe long exhales, because that's a calming effect that the body has physiologically. If we can breathe long exhales in the midst of the stress, we're going to, one, adapt a lot faster, and two, we're going to experience a much different relationship to stress. So all of a sudden, instead of having this fight and tension associated with the cold, we end up training the system to be calm in the midst of the stress. And that new relationship is a huge leverage point across the board. Now, you asked about the breathing. So that's the breathing while actually in the stressor. We get the external stressor and we get calm amidst the stress by breathing out long exhales. But there's another dimension that people will find very, very helpful that makes all the difference. And not 100% of people need it. But if you have a challenge with the cold, it's like having a skeleton key unlock this power. So that is priming the body using breath work prior to entering the cold, right? And so this is where the Wim Hof method, sort of basic protocols, are tremendously helpful. And so what happens is you go through a series of deep breaths, and the basic protocol is essentially 30 to 40 large breaths. So you're going to breathe deeply in, expanding the belly, the chest, and a simple passive exhale, letting go. So in other words, the breath work, the work side is on the inhale and the passive side is on the exhale. And so you're really stimulating action-oriented behavior. Every breath in is more action-oriented. Every breath out is more rest-oriented on a smaller scale. And so we're really focusing on pulling large breaths in and just doing those passive exhales so that we can ramp up. And that primes the body in two ways, especially as we steer into a breath hold. That's an extended breath hold for as long as we can. That's part two after we do 30 to 40 of those deep breaths. And then we'll do a third part, which is a recovery breath, just an inhale, breath hold, and hold for 10 to 15 seconds. So those three parts, the deep breaths, the breath hold, and that recovery breath, end up priming the system, giving us lots of adrenaline, but at the same time, giving us a calming and relaxed effect that is incredibly useful to prime the body with a calm mind. And then you go into the shower afterward, after you've stabilized, you've got a good clear head, you're good to go. You get into the shower and it makes it 10 times easier because your body's already partially into that stress response. It's a different type of stress response, but it's nonetheless very helpful. And so that's really how the magic works. Now, one safety bit for your listeners, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Wim Hof method, it really is essential to do those deep breaths and the breath hold in a safe place, lying down. You could do it in your bed. You could lie down on the floor. You just want to do it there because when we're breathing that vigorously at rest, our body's not used to it. It's going to go into a strong stress response and you're going to get a lot of sensations. You might feel a little bit of lightheadedness as you go through a stress response, right? Because the blood is starting to be rerouted throughout the body. It's preparing you for action, even though we're not taking much action. So just be careful with that. Started doing it in a safe place. And then make sure you're nice and calm and stabilized, blood pressure's good before you just pop up and get into the shower. So that would be how it all works together, Eric.
And would that be, let's say, from a management, was that number one for you that you recommend to people? What's your, or I should say maybe number one, or one of the easiest ones to do every day?
So if you did one round, so those 3 parts of Wim Hof method breathing, that will last it takes about 2 minutes to take those 30 to 40 deep breaths. And if you're going to do an extended breath hold, if you're a newer practitioner, that's probably going to be anywhere from maybe you hold your breath for 45 seconds, or some people that have a little bit better ability to manage stress and to deal with higher CO2 might be able to hold their breath for even up to 2 minutes at the beginning. But in other words, that one round is a very simple practice that takes less than 5 minutes. Your cold shower, you can start in as little as 30 seconds to a minute in the cold shower. So we're talking about a daily routine. If you just did those 2 things, we're talking about less than 6-7 minutes of your day. And the result from that is a huge leverage point. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have better mood. As I mentioned, all the other things, you're going to get an increase of dopamine. Dopamine is what helps us with motivation. It's what helps us with reinforcing behavior. And so this is a practice that, although has a challenge, has that added benefit of being self-motivated as we get into it and do it more frequently. In fact, I hated the cold at the beginning. And what I noticed is a few months in, I started to really look for the cold. I couldn't wait to get in it. I was, what the hell is wrong with me? I've hated the cold my whole life. But now I'm actively seeking it out everywhere I go. So that's a very big boost as well. There's another dimension with the dopamine that's really helpful in terms of its production. So unlike so many things in modern society that give us dopamine hits, we get dopamine hits every time we look at our phone, every time we're on screen, every time we're watching TV. We get it with a lot of the sugary foods that we eat. We get it all over the place. But many of those things, because they don't have the added piece of effort, actually reduce our overall ability to have dopamine in the system. So we get this small little spike, and then we get a deeper trough. And that trough keeps getting lower and lower and lower as we encounter all of these things that give us dopamine. Well, the cold actually is very different. When we do the cold, it requires effort. We get a large dopamine spike with it. But when we settle afterward, we actually settle the baseline higher than when we started. Now, that's a unique facet that is not common. And so that's one of the biggest benefits. So for people that are struggling with motivation or dealing with some mild depression and so forth, this is a huge boon. All of a sudden, you're much more motivated to tackle the other obstacles in your day because of the neurochemistry that's taking place.
And that's one of those fascinating things that I always think people get tripped up on when they hear about dopamine and cold exposure and cold plunges. How this is terrible. It hurts. It doesn't elicit a response. Intertwining of the pain receptor and the dopamine, pain and pleasure is very, very connected, but it is that delayed release of, hey, I just had an extreme effort. That was tough. I'm okay. I'm coming out on the backside of it, and you feel good. I get out of the cold shower. I'm like, that sucked, but I just did it. And I take it the same way. I look at exercise the same way. It's tough. The harder it is, when you're done, all of a sudden you're, man, I feel good. But it's hard for especially young people to kind of wrap their head around it, because you said it's not that instant, quick dopamine hit that they're so used to. And you said earlier, they basically taken away all the small stresses of the world or of their day that helps them mitigate and become stronger. So then they get these stresses that are dopamine hits. They're lower and lower. It's no wonder why kids are having problems nowadays, because they're just plummeting the dopamine. And it's even for adults, something that needs to be reset. And that cold exposure is a great reset every single day.
Yeah. Well, one of the things for young kids that's so helpful, and it's good for adults too, to have this attitude, but make it playful. So my daughter, she's 16 years old, and she's been playing in the cold since she was younger, 8, 9, 10. And we have snowball fights in our swimsuits, and we do snow angels, and we'll go on mountain hikes and dip into the cold lakes and just play. And because I was training her in that way, in a playful way, it wasn't training. It's just fun. I would sing in the shower deliberately. When I'm in the cold shower, I'd sing a loon because she loved it. She'd, Papa, what are you doing? This is when she was younger. And I was, it feels good to be in the cold shower. And so being that role model was very helpful. So for those of us that have kids that are looking to get them into this kind of practice, a little goes a long way. You don't need tons of it. The dopamine hit is actually really strong and quite substantial. So if people start to perceive it as actually good for them, they're going to get the happiness, the endorphin rush from the cold, all that kind of good stuff. And actually, in a very short time, they'll look forward to those cold showers. So not only my daughter who does it, who's an extraordinary athlete, great at academics as well, leadership across the board. And I attribute a lot of her success, for sure, to her hard work, but also to these other practices that she's adopted, martial arts, cold exposure, that kind of thing, and simplified breath work, really simplified breath work for the young kids. What they can do is simply just connect to their breath, and that alone is a big boost. So having these kids get over that initial hump, it's that first 2 weeks is the hardest part. So maybe make it social. If you've got kids, make it a cold water challenge that everybody's going to do and put their name on the challenge. That can be a good way to inspire young people. And then they take it over. They prod and push each other, and they start to see it. Oh, this is a cool thing. This is something that is actually something that they'll want to do. And once you get past the first couple of weeks, kids can soar. I've had a lot of young teens and so forth really go deep into the practice. And I've had parents come across as I've gone throughout the world and tell me how great their kids are doing because they adopted something as simple as cold showers in the morning. And you don't even have to make the whole shower cold. Just do 30 to 90 seconds of cold in the shower. So in other words, once you're calm after the stress, you feel relaxed even as the cold water's hitting you, and you kind of get that wetsuit feel. I don't know if you've experienced that yet, where it almost feels like your body's got this resilient shield on it, this vest. That's a really cool feeling. So once you have that, you're good. And that only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to get. And if you want to extend it out to 2 minutes, great. But it doesn't need to take even your whole shower. Just do part of your shower. And man, that will make you feel great for the day as well. And so a lot of kids can get behind this. I think we just need some slightly different strategies to hook them at the beginning and get them going.
I agree. I think it's a lot of it is building their communities within themselves. What you said, a challenge, and it becomes that wetsuit feeling, or it's almost like for me, I know I'm getting hit with cold water, but it doesn't really feel cold. There's almost a disconnect. Yeah. And you're just like, okay, I know it's cold, but we're good. And even sometimes I get in a cold bath. After a while, I can sit there and I'm actually warm. Yeah. I'm not like, oh, this is bath water. I know it's cold, but my body's just like, hey, there's nothing really threatening here. And you can kind of feel just like you're just sitting there. And that's what's a lot of kids, a lot of my athletes, is just getting past that point of uncomfortable, of anything it is. It could be a workout. It could be cold exposure, even sauna, heat exposure, anything to what it's going to be. And that's one method, breathing in the cold. Other daily stresses to manage. Let's bring it open to adults, kids. You said use your daily stress to help manage stress. What other stresses do you implement in your day or in your methods to help people understand bigger realms of stress? Because I think we all have different stresses in this world. Everyone's a little bit different, but I'm sure you have some that are all very similar or things you can go to manage overall overwhelming.
Yeah, so I think really the key is to have really simple practices that you do frequently. In other words, every day, as often as you every day. So it doesn't need to take a lot of your day, but frequency and consistency is really the key. And so again, a lot of the tools that I use they're pretty high threshold, meaning they do a lot for the body. So you don't need a lot of them in terms of the time typically. But what that allows us to do, Eric, is show up to all of the 1,000 stressors that we don't choose. So in other words, if you choose strategically just a couple of things, anything else you encounter, the body automatically responds differently. So I like to build and help build people's daily stress into daily strength by selecting specific things. So what are those specific things? Well, everything starts and ends with the breath. So if you had one leverage point and only one thing you could do every day, you'd connect to your breath. Here's why. So if you're breathing, first off, you can carry the breath everywhere you go. You're going to breathe, most of us on average, 20,000 times or plus per day. So you've got a lot of opportunities to train it. There's different protocols that you can use that are very simple that exist throughout. And the most disrupted thing that causes excess stress in our lives is breathing. When we encounter a difficulty, the most common thing that happens is we hold our breath. So if a kid is taking a test, he's getting ready to go into a test, there's a really good chance that he's got disrupted breathing. If an executive or any number of people that are just working in a corporate environment are sitting, even doing something as simple as typing email, there's a really good chance they're holding their breath more often than they even realize. In fact, a lady that was a corporate executive, Linda Stone, dubbed what's called email apnea. Apnea means breath hold. Email apnea, people are holding their breath while they're typing emails. As a martial arts instructor, every time I teach somebody a new move or concept or striking pattern, anything, what do? They get ready, they're listening to it, it's their turn to try, they take a breath in, and now they're trying to do a move and trying to do some kind of patterning. And what happens with that? Well, CO2 builds up in the body, and that's an anxiety trigger for people. Following a breath hold, we often have unmanaged breathing, so we're breathing faster. Many of us are breathing through our mouth unnecessarily. So mouth breathing, specific protocols using mouth breathing can be wonderful, but not all mouth breathing is equal. Vast majority of the time, we should be breathing with our nose because it's a much more calming effect, and you can just use it so much better. So lots of reasons to just get a breath practice. So what could that look like? I'll give you 3 ways that you can leverage this. One is what we talked about earlier, the Wim Hof method. That's an upregulating breath work as well as a calming effect. So it's got sort of a duality.
Now that one, is that, because you mentioned nose and mouth, is
Yep.
the Wim Hof in through the nose, out through the mouth, or is it in through the nose, out through the nose? What does that look like, and can it be interchanged?
Yeah, so if you're a kid and you're doing this, because we don't typically teach kids, or if you're new to the practice and you're not quite guided yet, start with the nose. So just in through the nose and let go, and you can let go through the nose or mouth. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
So that's a great place to start, and don't overstress it. I don't want to take a nose breath where I'm lifting my shoulders and squeezing my neck muscles. It's going to be miserable. Just nice full breath and letting go. Really starting low in the diaphragm and letting it wave up into the chest. Nice deep breaths, calming effect. For those of us that struggle with the nose because it's blocked or something like that, one of the things you can do is you can just slow down the breathing to the extent possible. So you're breathing in through the nose and then start humming on the way out. And within 30 seconds or a minute, for vast majority of us, you're going to clear out a lot of the blockage. Okay, there's other protocols if you're really suffering and maybe you've got chronic sinusitis or something. You'll need to do that much longer. You'll need to do the humming effect for an extended period, even up to 1 hour potentially for a few days in a row. And then that is even shown under study that it'll eliminate chronic sinusitis. So that's a very powerful thing that people can do if you're blocked in the nose. But that's a great place to start. For more skilled practitioners that have an understanding of nuanced mouth breathing, within the Wim Hof method practice, you can include it, but it has an amplified effect. And so I would caution people, if you're new, just start with the nose. It's way easier, it's better. And then as you build an understanding of how to use the mouth properly for this specific practice, that can be really good. And in that case, you can breathe in through the nose and mouth together and even out through the mouth. And so something that might look still low in the diaphragm, still a nice deep breath. But now I'm breathing in through the nose and mouth together. and a passive exhale. Again, it's an amplified effect, so it's going to cause a lot more intense sensations. Be aware. And so that's a great practice to do with the Wim Hof method. Now, the vast majority of practices that are breathing practices don't really need the mouth except on the exhale.
Looking for personalized workout plans? Whether you prefer to train at home or hit the gym, try a 14-day free trial of the Think Fitness Life mobile app. Get customized workouts, nutrition guidance, and coaching from a qualified professional who will be in your corner every step of the way. Visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com to start your free trial today. That's www.thinkfitnesslife.com.
So a really simple other protocol that your listeners and viewers can practice is what's called coherence breathing. Is something you can do anywhere, anytime. Yeah, it takes a little bit of focus, but you can do it sitting, standing, anywhere. And all it is you're just breathing in for 5 seconds or 6 seconds and out for 5 or 6 seconds. So just keeping it really simple, and you're trying to work the full capacity of your lungs. So I'll demonstrate just one cycle. That's it. And you just do that for 1 to 2 minutes, and your state will immediately change. All of a sudden, you'll be more balanced in your stress and rest. And so that's coherence breathing. And the last category, sort of broad categories that you'll encounter out there for breath work that I can actually simplify for your listener, is simply a resting protocol or a down-regulating protocol. So if we circle back to what I was talking about when you get into the cold shower, for example, when we have a strong external stressor, or maybe you're getting ready for a meeting that's really challenging that's coming up at your office, or for kids, you're getting ready for a test, you might need a down-regulating protocol. And what that looks is a shorter inhale and a longer exhale. So that's all that we're really doing for those. And so we can vary the speed and pace and intensity and a lot of other variables, but just to keep things simple, you can do something like 4 to 5 second inhale and a 7 to 8 second exhale. And that's a really simple protocol so that you can down regulate. And so I encourage people to really start there. Start with the breath. If you can adopt one thing in your life today, adopt a breath practice, because what that's going to do is all of a sudden throughout your day, you're going to be much more aware of your stress and how to manage it in real time. You can't always just go jump in a cold shower or go to a martial arts training or go on a hike or do something that's more intense, but you can breathe anywhere. So that's where I love to start.
Yeah, I love it. And a lot of times with the exhaling, what I find is people, even myself, it's hard to get a 4 to 8 second exhale. Sure. A lot of people want to get that air out hard. Just sigh that air out, let that air come out to let that system relax. Now, I'm sure we could talk about a forceful exhale if we want to drive more sympathetics or a different kind of output. Mm-hmm. But I assume kind of what you're talking about is dampening that system, taking vagal nerve stimulation and allowing that system become more relaxed through a long, softer exhale.
Yeah, so think about every breath out is more of a parasympathetic or resting response because you're adding extra stimulation to the master nerve of the body that controls the resting part. The rest, repair, all of that kind of thing. And that's called the vagus nerve, as you mentioned. And so there's a few ways to add extra stimulation. It's working every single breath. It's every single moment of every single day, that nerve is acting on your organs, your heart, your liver, your digestion, everywhere. And it has an effect to help balance your nervous system, the part that governs a lot of the autonomic processes. So if we want to add extra stimulation that has a calming effect or a relaxing effect, well, you can sigh on the way out. That's a vocal thing. So a very common thing would be maybe 2 inhales and a sigh and exhale. That vibration is another way. So it's the exhale paired with the vibration. Or you can purse your lips to extend your exhale longer. So for those that struggle with that, 4 to 6 seconds or 8 seconds on the exhale. Purse your lips to restrict the airflow. That'll allow you to do it easier. So I won't go for 8 seconds because that's a lot of dead time, but I'll show you generally what I mean is as you breathe in, shorter inhale, and then longer exhale. By pursing your lips, you're controlling that airflow, and it's going to be much easier to have that extended. And by having those pursed lips, it adds extra stimulation. Or if you can't do it for 8 seconds because it's still too long, try to hum on the way out, or try to create a little bit of vibration, or that ohm sound, or any of those kind of things. All of that adds an amplified effect to your vagus nerve and will be relaxing. So you got to pick your poison. If you're sitting at the test and you're starting to do some humming or vibration, you might be looked at as the weirdo or interrupting or distracting others. So obviously use your social cues to keep you straight. But there's lots of ways in other words, to have that calming effect.
And I think breathing's spot on, the number one to kind of regulate your system. And with a lot of my clients, that's the first thing I go to in testing from a postural restoration standpoint is breathing mechanics. And a lot of people, they want to tense up. I hold their breath. They start to panic. I'm just seeing where their system likes to go on the span of, okay, how excitatory are we going to go? And then I find a lot of people can't breathe air out. They want to get air in, but they're just not getting it out. And they're staying this hyperinflated. So that just drives anxiety and stress even higher. So with breathing, that whole thing is super important because we do it every day. We do it. We don't even think about it. It's non-voluntary. It's what we do to stay alive, but it's so prevalent. If we're breathing in a bad position, it can stem everything.
You nailed it. And for those people that are really struggling in order to get that air out, there's another thing that they can focus on, and it's more of a down-regulating side of things, but it's also a CO2 clearance in a positive way. And what that looks like is focusing on forceful exhales and letting the inhale actually be a little bit more passive. Your inhale rather, is never going to be fully passive. Your exhale can be. I can be passive, meaning no muscles are involved. But I can also do a concerted exhale. So I'm actually using my obliques and abdominals and everything to push the air out. So, and then just let the air come in nice and easy through the nose. And when I'm filled up about 60, 70%, I can push the air out again. And actually focusing on that exhale side of things is excellent for people that are struggling in this way to actually get better oxygenation back to the system if they're struggling to get an inhale, because we start to get so sympathetically ramped. And one of the things that people do that exacerbates a bad situation, makes it worse, is that they open their throat and they start doing mouth breathing. And so not only can I not get a lot of exchange, I'm not warming and moistening the air, I'm actually don't have enough pressure difference between the outside and the inside of my lungs. I've got an open throat. It ends up turning havoc. The vascular system tightens, and in order to try to use and gather more air, but you're not able to, it's a terrible way to breathe. And you're going to make a bad situation worse. So instead of that, focusing on that sort of bottom side, if you will, of the capacity, and clearing at the bottom, and then just letting a nice nose inhale come in, that's a really good way to address that issue and to build breath awareness for people.
So breathing, number one for you. What are your other tools in your toolbox that people throughout the day can add some stress into their day to manage bigger stress?
Great. Fasting routines. Fasting routines are excellent. And so I've got basically 5 root stressors, and we've already talked about the cold showers and so forth, or heat. Those are great stressors. Breathing is the stress tool modulator. It's everything. It's one of the root stressors. But another one is fasting. So fasting is an excellent way. Now, if we're talking about kids, we got to be real careful, and that's probably not going to be your primary thing for children. But for adults, this can be an excellent way if it's approached with care and focus. So what does that care and focus look like? If we're talking about it, generally speaking, where we want the fasting to occur, if we're doing it on a frequent basis, on a consistent basis, in intermittent fasting, so we're maybe eating for a very common one, I'll just bring it up, is a 16-8. So we're eating for 8 hours and fasting for 16 hours. And so what that should look is actually ending your eating earlier in the day. A lot of people love to just skip breakfast and go straight to the noon lunch and make that the start of their day, and they'll eat from, say, noon to 8 p.m. Ideally, you would shift it actually earlier. You'd start when you wake up, maybe within a half an hour to an hour of when you wake, and you'd end a little bit earlier because that'll facilitate a better sleep at night. You'll end up being just much better off physiologically for most of us. Now, the key here is make it work in your life. So I've got a partner, she's an intermittent faster. She's also a doctor by trade, and she loves to wait until 1 or 2 p.m. to eat, and then she gets done at 7 or 8 p.m. at night. And that's her fasting routine. She loves it. It works great for her, and she's by no means the only one. But if this is a newer practice and you're getting into it, I'd really encourage you to experiment starting your eating earlier and ending earlier to facilitate the rest of the things that are helpful in your body to have time to do its functioning.
Yeah, because I'm sure she is eating the things. I obviously assume, because I think a lot of people, and it's awesome you bring it up, they delay breakfast and then they go hard for lunch and dinner, but they're not eating the things. They're just saying, hey, I'm skipping breakfast in early morning or whatever morning you want to call because it's easy. And then you see them at lunch or dinner start coming unhinged because they can't control the hunger. So I assume if you can do it that way, your partner, it can just be great depending on what you eat to help your sleep.
Eric, you nailed it. And this is what I talk about approaching the practice with care. So there's two things that you really need to understand. For your listeners, we all need to understand these two things that are critical. The idea with an intermittent fast is that you are not feeling excess stress when you're not eating. That's precisely the opposite of what you should experience. So the idea with the consistent behavior of this is actually you're relatively calm and easy. You won't get these big crashes and spikes anymore if you're selecting the food. So if you're just starving, really, really struggling between the fasting periods and the eating periods, that tells you a couple things. One, you need to revisit what you're eating. Maybe your macronutrients aren't enough. You're not getting enough macronutrients. Maybe you're eating too many carbs or simple carbs that are causing spikes in glucose and insulin that are going to wreak havoc on the system. And if you do that, plus intermittent fasting where you're feeling really stressed, you're actually going to develop heart disease probably. The opposite effect of what it can produce in terms of benefits. So this can be incredibly beneficial, but if it's not approached with the proper care, you're going to get the negative side effects. Weight gain, your body will go into storage mode so that every time you eat, you'll end up gaining weight instead of losing it. So if you're experiencing irritability, excess weight gain, spikes and crashes, and all of those kind of things, those are all really clear signs that you're not doing the practice properly. What you should experience from a proper fasting routine, if you're doing intermittent fasting, is you should feel actually more level, more clear in the head, less brain fog. You're going to give your body plenty of time to go through processes of autophagy and cell repair and cleanup. That's what that means. So you're going to get a lot of benefits from there, more stable glucose and insulin production, and you'll actually get to an ideal weight optimization in an ideal sort of format. So a great thing to check in with for your people, if you're doing your eating, you've got your meal plan, check in. First off, how do you feel when you eat? Do you feel I was satisfied, I ate enough, I feel good during the meal? That's check number one. Check number two is 15 minutes after. 15 minutes after, check in with yourself. How do you feel? Do you have any headache or bloating, anything like that? If the answer is no, okay, that's also a good sign. 4 hours later, do you have sustained energy and are feeling good again? You can eat. Okay, you might be hungry, but you're not freaking out or starving. All right, there's another good sign. And then the last marker is, how did you sleep at night? Did you sleep well? If the answer is yes to all of those questions, you're good. If the answer was, I feel terrible, I'm bloating, headache, I'm starving, whatever the combination, you got to revisit the food, right? Figure out what you're eating and change it up.
feel like it comes back to similar when we talked about the cold water. It's almost not, I don't want to say it's not managing stress. It's almost managing the lack of dopaminergic events in someone's day, because I might take a wild stance here, but after a while, and there's a grace period when you start intermittent fasting. At first, you're, oh my gosh, I'm really hungry. Then after a couple days, your body's okay. I get this. If you don't give it those dopaminergic spikes of high sugar food or high fatty food or a combo of both, and then you're just like, you kind of get used to this stress. It's your body is inoculated to this time frame where it's, hey, I know I'm not getting a boatload of dopamine, but when I have healthy, good food, it comes in, my system feels good, but it's not this crazy spike overload and then come back down. And I feel a lot of what today's world is, adults and kids, besides life's crazy stresses, illnesses, and sickness, some of this day-to-day stuff is very much, is it dopamine responses that we're just waiting for and we don't get? So then we're irritable. So then we feel more stressed out with certain things. So I know when I drive to certain places at certain times, there's going to be traffic. I'm not surprised by it. And then some people I could say, oh, that's a stressor, but it's something where it's just, I just got to get used to that and tell the autonomic system, chill out. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, so you hit a big point. There is a sweet spot. There's a couple of things. One, there's new baselines. So we want to have a new baseline to stress. And I think
Correct.
That's what you hit on the most. Because if we don't have these practices where we're including some pretty good effort, then our systems are weakened by it. It was kind of like the first biosphere that they did, the fake one back in the day. They built an artificial biosphere in order to try to grow plants in a closed environment. And at first, what happened? Everything failed. They planted all those plants and they all died. And then in the part two, when they did it again, they added one feature because they had nutrients in the soil. They had all these other things, but they added a stressor. They added wind. So when they started circulating air in the biosphere, all of a sudden, the plants grew strong. The trees grew strong. In other words, you need a little bit of a stress in order to build strong roots and a strong trunk and have health. And so trees are no different in that sense than us. And so what you're talking about is building a baseline and a foundation that actually includes some level of resistance. And we can think about this just in terms of if anybody's ever tried to lift, something that was weighted. If it's new, it's hard. It's, gosh, the muscles aren't prepared to lift it and all of these kind of difficulties. And then you have a routine for a few months. Gosh, the strength gains are there. The muscles grow. In other words, you build strength within the system. So that's the first part. And to speak of the dopamine and some of the other neurochemistry that's happening, because there's a variety of different things that are happening.
Right.
We have to resensitize these receptors in a positive way. And the only way to do that, to make them more sensitive, is to either reduce whatever we're giving them or change what we do for them. So those are the two ways that we actually rebuild a lot of the neurochemistry in the body and so how it functions. And so with fasting, that's that time delay, that effort that we put in that gives things time to resensitize. If we're constantly eating sugary foods and processed stuff and snacks throughout the day and pretty much any kind of food constantly, with few exceptions, then what we're going to get is we're going to bombard our insulin receptors. We're going to have circulating glucose constantly, and insulin as a response to that circulating glucose to manage it and not make it toxic in our body has to constantly be used. And it's a faucet that's never turned off, but you've only got a storage tank that's got a limited supply before it can refill. You're going to deplete it. The dopamine, where it just, I said, stair steps down because we're constantly pinging it. So those things, we got to have time delays where we give the body a chance to take the resources and build new and fresh neurotransmitters and some of the other chemistry in the body. The other piece is there are certain exercises that when we put in effort, flood the body in terms of fresh materials. So high intensity exercise is a great one. Pretty much any exercise is going to do this, but high intensity does it extremely well. All of a sudden you get all this boost of fresh hormones and fresh neurotransmitters and all this chemistry that's going to help our bodies look and feel better and provide building blocks to strengthen us. Those are the stressors that really make a difference. So That sort of steers into one of the fourth stressors that I would like to mention, which is a root stressor, which is the fight or flight response. And we typically think of fight or flight as that sort of bad thing or sometimes a global stress thing, but really it's a very specific pathway. It has to do with vying for things, vying for a job on the mental side and sort of the emotional side. But on the physical side, it's like getting out to do your hard work, going to exercise, going for a run, doing martial arts training, surfing, whatever it is that you want to do. We need to have that physical component because it's responsible for flushing in a lot of the fresh chemistry that we need to function optimally, to reduce depression, to reduce anxiety, and to build strength and resilience within the system.
That's always one thing that I've always had to have is some sort of workout. Now, not every day might be hard, but there's days where I just have programmed in, this is going to be a hard day, or I put some weight in a backpack and I go for a hike and I make it hard. My system thrives off that stuff because it's that accomplishment. I mean, it doesn't feel good while I'm doing it. I know you kind of wake up and you have some of these days, you know what the workout is, you're like, oh man, this is going to suck. But you do it anyways, and you get that accomplishment. You get that understood of, hey, I just survived it. My body felt like it was threatening. Love it. And I survived, and it's going to be better no matter what. It's this organism adapts like crazy. And this is where we got to push that system to just feel, okay, I feel like crap. Then you take a shower, 20, 30 minutes later, I feel good for the day. Whatever you can go on, you're okay, well, that part was the worst part of the day. And for some of my clients, I tell them, I'm going to make this the worst part of your day. I hope.
Good.
Right? I hope that there's nothing bigger than the stress that I'm about to tell you to do 15 reps of this, sprint on the assault bike, and I'm going to try to kill your system. So you're mad at me, but I hope that's the biggest load of stress that I can put on their system. They can go home and then just relax or go to work and just have a day.
You nailed it. And if you do that, that's the stress you choose that actually is going to make the rest of the day better. And you mentioned something earlier, which is some of the stressors that people experience, illness or the unexpected death or whatever it might be. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, if you actually understand how all these pieces fit together, when you choose a difficult thing on a day-to-day basis and you are strong, resilient, and healthy, anything you encounter is going to be more manageable. That stress you didn't choose, the thing that came out of nowhere that you were surprised about, all of a sudden you can rise to that occasion with much better effort and ease than you would if you hadn't built in those routines. And so what you mentioned is excellent. The hardest thing we should do in a day, the vast majority, 99% of our days and more, is the thing that we choose. And if you choose the hard stress, all the rest is going to be extremely manageable. You won't even feel most of it. It's only going to be those super rare events that are going to be really challenging and difficult, and you'll be able to shoulder it much more likely with calm, with focus, with intention, with all the things that you hope in a difficult situation. So I think you really nailed that in terms of how to show up day to day.
And it was with some of these stresses that are your staples of what people do. Sometimes I have clients that they get stressed out from the thought of this. What would you kind of coach someone that they're the people that they're getting stressed because they know what the workout is tomorrow, and let's say it's 400s on track. They're already starting to be stressed and anxious about something that's in the future, and then their system starts to spiral. They're stressed out, they start to go fight, and then they start to go flight, and they start to really kind of shut themselves down where they have the potential to harness it. Where would you start someone that?
That's a huge piece of the mindset. And so many people stress about being stressed. And gosh, why do you want to suffer twice? How do we get out of that mode? Well, ideally, we start doing practices. This is why it's so important, say, if we take a cold shower example and why that's so helpful. If I go into a cold shower and I just go in there and I get the boost of dopamine and endorphins, and because that's going to happen no matter what. If I get that cold water on my body, all of that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But how I think about that exercise and how I control my breath while I do it will actually make a difference in what you just talked about, which is being in the moment, understanding that we're capable, feeling calm amidst the stress, and retraining the system for how we experience challenge. Do I look at it as play, or do I look at it as a threat? Do I look at it as a challenge, or do I look at it as a threat? Maybe it's a better one. And having a playful attitude will help me look at it as a challenge much better than if I perceive it as a threat. It's going to make a difference in terms of how much cortisol is put in the system. So we want cortisol. Cortisol and adrenaline, they work great together. They're essential together. But if I have cortisol and adrenaline go up together and I have sustained cortisol over the period of time as that adrenaline is there too, well, one, I'm not going to get as high of adrenaline, which means I'm not going to perform as well. And two, that excess cortisol in the system is going to drag me down and make me crash and feel depleted and terrible. What I want is a good boost of cortisol and leveled off more quickly so that adrenaline can keep rising and go. So an analogy I often use on this one, Eric, is that if you want moonshot results, then you need to have this balance between cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol in this case is the rocket boosters. Adrenaline is the rocket itself. I need the cortisol to get my rocket outside of the atmosphere. But after that point, I need the rocket boosters to drop away so the rocket can go to the moon. If that doesn't happen, it drags the whole system down and it crashes and burns. So the hallmark of any high performer is cortisol and adrenaline go up, cortisol levels, adrenaline goes higher. And so how do we do that? Well, the way we do that is manage through the breath and the mindset. And so what we need to do is start approaching these things as not the misery that we have to endure, but the play that we get to have. Yeah, it's a challenge, but my body has the machinery to show up for it. I can breathe in the midst of it, and I'm going to perform better. I'm going to be able to dig in deeper and see what I'm made of. All of those things that sound trivial are actually essential if we want sustained high performance over a long term and not be suffering over and over and over again. So I would say we got to shift the mindset. And the way to do that is through some of these other shorter practices where I focus being calm amidst the stress. And then when I show up on your workout day where you're going to put me through the assault bike and kick my ass for this extended period, I'm going to do it with happiness. I'm going to look at it and say, all right, I'm going to rise to this challenge today and give it everything and smile at the pain a little bit.
And that's where I think everyone should get that thought process towards that workout. And that's why I like to give people a heads up of what they're going to do, because I want them to think about that. I want them to have that thought process of here is what's coming, but kind of start digesting it and come to terms with it. And that's one thing now where you see that people kind of don't want to know what's behind the next door. Anticipation, but they don't want to kind of know what's coming next because of the fear or the thought process that might drive their stress levels up. I've always been the opposite. I like to control my environment. I like to know what's coming, even if I know that I'm not a big runner. If I know I'm going to run 10 miles, hell, that's going to suck, but let's just do it. To me, because it's a challenge. I got to figure out what I like to do is, can my body handle that stress? And that's how I like to look at a lot of stuff. Like, I might not be great at it, but can I handle it?
Yep. Yeah. And that's a big deal. So if people we want to get to where you're at. We look at it as a challenge. We look at it as something, I want to see what the body's made of. If people are on the path to switching the mindset and they haven't quite gotten there yet, that's okay. Fake it till you make it, or shrink the timeline. In other words, if I'm worried about tomorrow's workout, well, don't think about tomorrow. Think about, what do I need to do today to feel more strong and focused? Well, I can do a breathing exercise that's going to bring me back to the present moment. That's a coherence breathing exercise. That would be a simple way. Just shrink the timeline. If you're in rep 5 of 10, and then the 5th rep, you're like, this is kicking my butt, but you got 5 more. If you start stressing about the 5 more, it's going to crush your system. Think about this rep. All I have to do is not quit this rep.
And I think that's what a lot of people think about. And now you say it, for me, it's subconscious. I'm just thinking about that next rep I need to take, not 4 or 5 here, which that's where we want people to get to these mindsets like you and I through these practices. Right? That's our end goal. And I know you said you had a 5th one.
Yeah.
What is the 5th one?
The 5th one is relationships. And this is going to vary depending on what we're talking about. If we're talking about the specific stress response in the body, because remember, I focus on the 5 root stressors and how to leverage those to live our best life. When we talk about that, we're typically talking about an intimate relationship or one of the 5 that are closest to us. So those are the really important relationships in our lives. And if we're talking about stress mastery, I tend to focus on just our intimate partners. But if we're talking about leveraging relationships in general, we want to talk about more of the extended 5. Who are the 5 closest people to you? And making sure that those people actually have our best interest at heart, that we are connecting. So when I tell somebody, a close person, that I am going to go for this goal, they help keep me accountable. They show up to support me. They don't interfere in that process, because otherwise it causes horrible stress. So I was working with one of our Olympic coaches recently, for example, and his athlete just won silver in the 2024 Olympics for a running event. And so really high level coach. I asked him again to kind of confirm about this. What are the most important things to make sure your athletes perform at their highest level? But he said, I always check about their personal relationships, because those will make you or break you. And we're not in this world alone, even though so much of what we do is decided based on our personal decisions. I definitely believe in that self-agency and that locus of control on the inside. It does make a difference. But the fact is part of that is our choice of who we choose to be around and who we don't choose to be around. You're going to be in circumstances where you can't choose who's next to you. So anywhere you can choose the good people, invest in those relationships, and be that friend, be that partner, be that coworker, whatever it is that's going to be that teammate that does the hard work. Do more than put your work in and demand that from others that are close to you, so that everybody thrives in that arena. So relationships are the 5th category.
I love it. I think it's social is such a big thing, because it ties into what we talked about, the whole thing, neurotransmitters, overall health. That is a big player too, because of this world of social media we live in, which is taking social out of it, in my opinion. It's social, but it's behind a screen, so you're not really having that aspect. Now, it can be done. I don't want to tell people it can't, because as you probably know, and I've built a network of my friends that are coaches in a community online, that we are back and forth holding ourselves accountable, amping ourselves up. And that's how we do it. But I feel, yet again, a lot of people aren't where you and I are, and we want them to get here. That's why we're sitting down and having these conversations, because we want people to get to the point where if I see you post something on social media, all it might be is I might put one of the arm emojis up, making a muscle, and you're like, okay, he understands me. He's encouraging me. He's got me. Check.
Yeah.
That's simple.
All of these tools can be used against you or for you. So I'm part of an international network of people where, I just got back from Poland. Now I'm down in Mexico. I've got tons of colleagues down here, over there. I live in the States. I was just hanging out with the head of the Ultraman for Australia. Our networks are all over. There's no way that I could have these conversations, support, and connections without social media and the internet. It's phenomenal. But if I don't use that for good, man, it's going to tank my system. All of a sudden, I'm going to be comparing myself to others. I'm going to be distracted constantly. I'm going to have dopamine depletion. It can work every bit as much against me as it could for me. So you bring up an excellent point. My 5 closest people, because of technology, might be that one person's in Ireland and another person's in New York City, and I'm down in California or New York or New Mexico or something. It doesn't really matter. Ideally, we do have those face-to-face interactions, because I don't want to discount that. That's huge. But make it work in your life, and just make sure you're leveraging those tools for good and not being sort of used by them to break you down.
Oh, we love it. That's awesome. Well, I know we've been taking about a little over an hour of your time. We really appreciate it. Anything else that you want to throw out or touch upon that we didn't cover in the last hour or so?
I would just say the one thing that I would really encourage everybody to do is pick a good challenge or a goal that you can put on the horizon that's going to require a lot of effort. Why? and hopefully has a good, challenging, fun payoff with it. The reason I suggest this is because it'll give you a reason to train day to day. So I'll give you an example. I run a trip in Alaska, a retreat that's 4 days long in the middle of winter, where we get down to our shorts and we dive into frozen waterfalls, and we go for hikes in the middle of winter, and we're jumping off bridges and short, that are fun into cold water, and doing snow angels and getting into the sauna and learning breath work practices. We got a private chef that cooks the best meat that you've ever had, because we bring locally hunted meat. I'm a hunter. I bring that. My business partner is a fisherman up in Alaska, brings Bristol Bay salmon, the best you can find anywhere in the world. We do that for a couple of reasons. It's my favorite trip of the year. The reason I love that one is because it draws people from all over the world. And anybody that signs up for that trip, they train. They get into that cold shower that was a little uncomfortable. They're going to show up and they're going to do the work because they've got something that they're looking forward to with a giant payoff. That not only do they get the bucket list travel and experience in the moment, but now they're going to carry those tools into the next phase of their life, where they're going to learn life-changing practices that end up sustaining. So what is that thing for you? I had some other colleagues that just did a world record on Kilimanjaro. These women just set a new world record for a speed ascent where they adapted with protocols on the mountain. That was their big thing. So they practiced every day to prepare for it. So this is the kind of thing that really makes a difference in your day-to-day. So what is that affordable thing for you? Not everybody can go to these kind of things or have the ability to climb an extreme altitude or go to an Alaska trip. If you can, do it. Make it part of your routine. If you can't, what is that thing that's going to do it? What challenge are you going to set yourself up to? That makes all the difference in your day-to-day motivation too.
Man, that Alaska trip sounds fun.
It's killer, man.
It sounds a lot of fun. And then with stuff like that, you build a network of, I assume there's a lot of people, not a lot, but a group of people go, you are now one with that people, because you all suffered together and you come out of those with different and new relationships because you just did this hard thing together. And it's almost like this understandable notion that, hey, we're now connected because we went through this journey. And that's the stuff I love about some of those. It's individual, it's group, it's relationship, and it's all intertwined into overall helping the human system become healthier.
You're exactly, and you build lifelong friendships. Mm-hmm. Guys that came on that trip, all of a sudden they're hunting together the next year, even though they live in different parts of the world, or people are showing up and just saying, hey, I did this thing in my life. And those groups stay connected for years. You can make friends that are really connected, close, and motivating from any number of walks of life. I mean, we had a men's health doctor from the UK, a tech entrepreneur from Ethiopia. We had this other lady from Switzerland that was in banking. We had another person that was just a truck driver. He does long haul trucking from Florida. You meet all kinds of different walks of life, and everybody stays connected and motivates each other because you did this shared badass thing. It's pretty cool.
That's what we got a lot about it. And then I know you said you're a hunter. What do you hunt? Big game, or what's your nice? Yeah. Where are you out of though? Are you West Coast?
So I'm based in both New Mexico and Seattle, Washington. So Albuquerque, New Mexico and Seattle, Washington are my two primary bases, though I spend time in Alaska and Mexico City quite frequently. And then I travel internationally for my work. I mentioned I was just in Poland a week ago, and I go there a couple of times a year to Europe, Spain, different places. But for my hunting, I hunt on the border of New Mexico and Colorado. I've had that hunt for about 10 years, nice. I'm a part of, and it's just a phenomenal hunt. I also hunt in Washington and so forth, but there's a lot more limitations in Washington, not quite as good. I've been really fortunate to be part of a world-class private ranch that I got invited to about a decade ago. And I just try to work as hard to get invited back and make sure I'm doing the good stuff at our camp there.
Well, I mean, because you must know, is it bow or are you gun?
So I do both. I do both bow hunting and rifle. This particular hunt that's before in November, it's a rifle hunt. So that's that one. And then I also do bow hunting as well.
Yeah, well, so I'm a big bow hunter too, and so that dopamine you get from getting something, not even getting something, seeing something or
Seeing
hearing
something.
it, but you sit all day and you're okay, this is annoying, this is aggravating. And then when you get that rush, it's nothing. It's crazy.
It's huge.
But
And
then,
that's a great practice, isn't it? That's
yes,
a great reinforcing practice that's going to help you manage stress better. Because if you're not managing stress, you're not going to get that shot.
and it's one of those things that keeps you out there. It keeps me sitting in the stand when I'm, oh my gosh, I want to go home. It's cold. I'm miserable. I haven't seen anything and I'm hungry, but what if? What
Yeah.
if I miss this? And that's just what keeps me going. And then that what if pays off.
Oh, I love it.
So I'm up in New England, so I hunt in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Big white-tailed deer hunter.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, I have to trade some hunting secrets offline here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I got an eye on a ranch here in New Mexico that I might get invited to for a future bow hunt in the rut. I'm really
Nice.
got my fingers crossed. I've been working that relationship and hoping that I get that invite.
There's nothing better than that part. Hunting the rut. It's coming up soon for us. I've already been out there a couple times and action's been crazy.
And you guys have a lot of deer out there, don't you?
Yeah, we have a problem. So they're
Yeah.
trying to get rid of them because there's not a lot of hunters.
Oh, yeah. And that brings us back full circle to some of the crossover between these stress tools. When we connect to the food that we eat, gosh, that is a powerful stressor and also stress reliever. It is a deep connection and bond. And so you bond with the people that you go on those trips with, you bond with the animal. It becomes this other part that is insanely healthy. And I think we've lost a lot of that in modern society. But getting back to nature, being reconnected with our food, that's a huge piece that I often will share with people, teach people at my workshops, of course, but also encourage people to get back connected. So whatever that looks like for you, for the hunters, get back. Or if you've never tried that, get connected to a group and go try it. It's a really phenomenal experience.
Awesome. And so where can people find you?
So the best ways are either social media or my website. My website is mattsoule.com. So that's MATTSOULE.com. And I'm on social media, Matt Soule SR5. So we're basically stress response. I focus on those 5 tools. So Matt Soule SR5 is available there.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on.